What if the person who cannot stop thinking about you is not struggling with attraction at all, but with a truth they have spent months or even years trying to avoid? What if your presence changed something so deeply inside them that no amount of distance, silence, or distraction could make it disappear? Sometimes the strongest connections are not the ones people openly embrace, they are the ones they fight the hardest to deny. There are moments in life when we convince ourselves that love happens by accident. We tell ourselves it is nothing more than timing, chemistry, or a lucky coincidence. We assume people enter our lives through random events and ordinary circumstances. Yet the deeper we look into human nature, the more we realize that some connections feel different. Some people arrive and leave an impression that cannot be explained by logic alone. Their presence feels familiar before it should. Their impact reaches places inside us that words cannot easily describe. When someone chooses you in a way that goes beyond surface attraction, it is often because something within them recognized something within you long before they understood it consciously. This is the question many people spend years trying to answer. Why does one person stand out among billions? Why does someone become attached to your energy, your voice, your presence, or the way you make them feel? Why do thoughts of you continue returning to their mind, even when they try to move forward? Why does your absence leave a deeper mark than the company of countless others? The answer often goes much deeper than most people imagine. Human beings are constantly searching for something missing inside themselves. Many of our fears, desires, and unanswered questions remain hidden beneath the surface. Often we feel drawn toward people who reflect qualities we need to discover within ourselves. That is why certain connections feel powerful from the very beginning. It is not because the other person is perfect. It is because they awaken something that has been sleeping inside us for a very long time. This person did not choose you simply because it was convenient. They chose you because your presence affected them in ways they could not ignore. You touched parts of them they had buried. You stirred emotions they had spent years trying to control. Around you, emotional numbness became impossible to maintain. That is what makes this connection different. Many people can attract attention. Very few can inspire real change. Without even realizing it, you became a mirror for this person. And mirrors can be powerful because they reveal truths people often try to avoid. Through you, they saw not only who they were, but who they could become. Your kindness highlighted the loneliness they had been carrying. Your strength exposed areas where they felt weak. Your honesty challenged the masks they had been hiding behind for years. This is one reason forgetting you has never been easy. People may forget temporary pleasures, they may forget ordinary conversations, but they rarely forget experiences that awaken them emotionally. Deep inside, they understand that this connection was not feeding their ego, it was challenging them to grow. And the human spirit is naturally drawn toward anything that has the power to transform it, even when that transformation feels uncomfortable. What makes this more remarkable is that you may not fully understand the influence you had on them. Often the people who affect others most deeply are completely unaware of their impact. They simply live authentically. They carry their struggles without making them everyone else's burden. They endure disappointment without becoming bitter. They continue moving forward despite setbacks. They continue caring despite past pain. In a world where so much is performance, authenticity becomes unforgettable. What this person saw in you was not perfection. It was something much rarer. They saw truth, and truth leaves a lasting impression. Many people spend their lives searching for something real, something they can trust, something that feels genuine. When they finally find it, it can be both comforting and frightening. Comforting because it feels right. Frightening because it demands honesty. Real connection has a way of removing excuses. It asks people to face themselves. It asks them to look at parts of their lives they have ignored. It asks them to question beliefs they have carried for years. That is exactly what happened here. You challenged the image this person had built of themselves. Perhaps they convinced themselves they did not need anyone. Perhaps they believed emotional distance was safer. Perhaps they thought vulnerability was a weakness. Perhaps they had learned to keep people at arm's length to avoid being hurt. Then you entered their life. Suddenly, those old beliefs stopped working. Your presence created a conflict they could not easily escape. One part of them wanted to run, another part wanted to stay. One side wanted to protect itself, the other side wanted to open up. This explains why their actions may have seemed inconsistent. Human beings often retreat from the very things they desire most, not because those things lack value, but because they carry the power to change them. Clears throat. Deep emotional connection awakens fear just as strongly as it awakens longing. It exposes hidden insecurities. It reveals unhealed wounds. It forces people to confront truths they would rather avoid. Yet there is something fascinating about meaningful connections. No matter how hard the mind tries to escape them, they often find ways to return. A memory appears without warning. A familiar feeling rises to the surface. A song reminds them of a moment they thought they had forgotten. A dream lingers long after they wake up. A random place brings your image back into their mind. These experiences are difficult to explain because they happen beneath conscious awareness. When a connection reaches the deepest layers of the mind, logic alone cannot erase it. That is important to understand. Being chosen on a deeper level has very little to do with appearance, status, or perfection. It is about resonance. It is about recognition. It is about feeling understood in a way that feels rare. Some people notice your outward qualities. Others connect with something much deeper. The second experience changes people permanently. This person is approaching a moment where they can no longer deny what your presence awakened inside them. What is emerging is not simply a confession of affection. It is an acknowledgement of change. It is the realization that meeting you altered something within their inner world. Perhaps the greatest loss in life is not rejection itself. Perhaps it is meeting someone who awakens your soul and never finding the courage to tell them. The most life-changing people are often the ones we least expect. They are the people who force us to encounter ourselves. Relationships become fascinating, not because emotions exist, but because people resist them. Many assume that when love arrives, it is immediately welcomed. In reality, the opposite is often true. The deeper the feeling, the stronger the urge to suppress it. Genuine connection threatens the illusion of control. It disrupts familiar patterns. It challenges comfort zones. It shakes old beliefs. That is exactly what happened to this person. What they feel for you became too meaningful to ignore, yet too overwhelming to fully accept. So, they reacted the way many people do when faced with something that could change their lives. They tried to escape it, not because it was false, but because it was real. The human mind contains both desire and fear. When someone encounters a connection capable of transforming them, those forces often collide. One side moves closer, the other pulls away. One side seeks connection, the other seeks safety. The result is confusion. The result is hesitation. The result is emotional contradiction. If this person's behavior has ever left you confused, it is because you were witnessing an invisible struggle taking place within them. They were not simply deciding how they felt about you. They were trying to understand what your presence revealed about themselves. Their silence was not always a sign that they felt nothing. Their distance was not proof that they did not care. In many cases, it was evidence of a battle they did not know how to win. The more they tried to ignore what they felt, the stronger it seemed to become. The more they focused on moving forward, the more reminders appeared. Because some connections do not disappear simply because we want them to. Some lessons remain until they are understood. Some people remain in our hearts until we face what they awakened inside us. And perhaps that is where this story truly begins. Not with attraction, not with timing, not with coincidence, but with recognition. The recognition that certain people enter our lives for a reason. They challenge us. They transform us. They help us discover parts of ourselves we never knew existed. And once that discovery happens, life can never return to what it was before. More often than not, it was the result of emotions becoming too intense to process. Many people know how to handle attraction, but very few know how to handle true vulnerability. They understand how to charm others. They know how to impress people. They can entertain, joke, and keep everything light. But allowing another person to see beneath the surface is an entirely different experience. It requires removing the protective layers they have spent years building, and that is where fear begins. At some point, this person realized that you were seeing more than the image they presented to the world. You noticed the loneliness hidden behind their confidence. You sensed the sadness beneath their smiles. You recognized the exhaustion they concealed behind their strength. Knowing that someone could see beyond mask made them deeply uncomfortable. Most people spend years creating identities designed to protect themselves from disappointment. Some become emotionally unavailable. Others rely heavily on independence. Some hide behind achievements. Others use humor, control, or constant distractions. No matter what form it takes, the goal is usually the same. They want to avoid getting hurt. Then a connection appears that makes those defenses ineffective. You became that interruption without even intending to. Your presence awakened feelings they had pushed aside for years. Memories they thought were buried began resurfacing. Old emotional wounds demanded attention once again. Questions they had spent years avoiding suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Around you, remaining emotionally asleep was no longer an option, so they resisted. Not because they wanted to lose the connection, but because every meaningful transformation begins with discomfort. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of emotional growth. People often imagine awakening as a peaceful experience filled with immediate answers. In reality, it often begins with confusion. It shakes the foundation of the old self. It exposes unresolved pain. It reveals fears that have been hidden for years. Before understanding arrives, chaos often appears first. That helps explain why this person may have pulled away after moments of closeness, why they seemed distant after becoming emotionally open, why expressing their feelings appeared much harder than it should have been. They were trying to maintain control over emotions that refused to stay contained. But the deeper mind has its own way of speaking. When feelings are suppressed on the surface, they often find other ways to emerge. Thoughts return unexpectedly during quiet moments. Memories appear without invitation. Dreams become unusually vivid. Familiar songs suddenly feel meaningful. Ordinary places become reminders of someone who cannot be forgotten. Even simple experiences begin carrying emotional weight. The mind naturally seeks resolution for emotions that remain unfinished. What is ignored consciously often continues working beneath awareness. This is where deeper awareness begins to emerge. Not as something supernatural, not as magic, but as repeated reminders that truth can only be avoided for so long. Life starts placing mirrors in front of the person. Patterns repeat themselves. Certain lessons keep returning. Coincidences begin to feel meaningful. Emotional signals continue appearing until denial becomes exhausting. Eventually, the pressure reaches a point where hiding the truth becomes more painful than speaking it. That is the stage this person is moving toward. They are beginning to realize that creating distance never freed them from what they felt. Silence did not erase the bond. Avoidance did not weaken the attachment. If anything, stepping away only made them more aware of its importance. Authentic emotional connections rarely disappear simply because someone tries to suppress them. Often they continue growing beneath the surface, quietly, steadily, patiently. They shape thoughts, emotions, and decisions in ways that are not always obvious. The ego values certainty. It values control. It values pride. But the deeper part of us values meaning. And once someone experiences a connection that carries genuine meaning, ordinary distractions begin losing their influence. Temporary pleasures no longer satisfy in the same way. Surface-level conversations feel incomplete. Shallow experiences lose their appeal. Something deeper has been awakened. That is why they are approaching an internal turning point. The effort required to hide their feelings is becoming heavier than the fear of revealing them. For a long time, they believed the emotions would eventually fade. They assumed time would weaken the connection. They expected distance to make everything easier. Instead, the connection continued evolving within them, silently, steadily, in ways they never expected. Perhaps that is one of the deepest truths about love. The emotions we fight against most fiercely are often the ones carrying the most important lessons. They reveal parts of ourselves we have ignored. They expose needs we have denied. They shine light on truths we would rather avoid. Eventually, honesty becomes unavoidable, and the longer someone runs from that honesty, the louder their heart becomes. What makes this connection so significant is that it was never built on anything superficial. It was never simply about attraction. It was not based on convenience. It was not built on loneliness. It was not driven by temporary fascination. The reality reaches much deeper. When the truth is finally spoken, it has the power to change both people involved. This person did not merely notice your appearance. They encountered something within you at a moment when they were emotionally exhausted themselves. Whether you realized it or not, your presence became a source of comfort, a source of emotional safety, a place where they felt understood. This reflects something important about human psychology. We are not drawn only toward beauty. We are not drawn only toward pleasure. At a deeper level, we are often drawn toward balance. We seek people who reconnect us with forgotten parts of ourselves. Sometimes one person enters our life and reminds us how to feel after years of emotional numbness. That is what happened here. Before meeting you, this person may have learned how to survive, but they had forgotten how to truly live emotionally. Perhaps they became experts at appearing strong. Perhaps they learned how to hide pain behind confidence. Perhaps they embraced independence so completely that they convinced themselves they no longer needed anyone. But surviving and feeling whole are not the same thing. Then you entered their world. The emotional walls they had spent years constructing no longer felt as solid. The barriers they trusted began to weaken. Not because you demanded change, not because you forced anything, but because your authenticity made pretending difficult. True authenticity is far rarer than most people realize. Many people constantly adjust themselves to gain approval. They change to avoid rejection. They change to maintain control over how they are perceived. They present different versions of themselves depending on the situation. They become whatever they think others expect. But every so often, someone possesses a kind of honesty that cannot be manufactured, a quiet sincerity that feels natural, a depth that comes from experience, a wisdom created by pain that transformed them instead of hardening them. That was the quality they recognized in you. And once someone encounters that kind of truth, it becomes almost impossible to forget. What affected them most was not simply what you said. It was who you remained, despite everything you had endured. They watched you continue showing kindness after being hurt. They watched you continue caring after disappointment. They saw you remain compassionate when life gave you reasons to become bitter. They noticed your ability to keep moving forward without losing your humanity. That left a lasting impression on them because deep inside, they knew how difficult that was. They knew how easy it would have been to close your heart. They understood how many people choose bitterness after pain, yet you chose something different. You chose growth. You chose understanding. You chose authenticity. And whether they admitted it or not, they admired that more than they could express. The longer they observed you, the more they realized that what they felt was not temporary. It was not a passing attraction. It was not a fleeting curiosity. It was something deeper, something that continued growing even when circumstances became complicated. Something that remained present even when distance entered the picture. Something that refused to disappear no matter how hard they tried to ignore it. And that realization changed everything. Because once a person understands that a connection has touched the deepest parts of their heart, pretending becomes harder than honesty. The truth begins demanding attention. The feelings begin asking to be acknowledged, and sooner or later every person reaches a moment when they must decide. Will they continue hiding from what they feel, or will they finally accept the truth that has been waiting for them all along? That moment is closer than they realize, and when it arrives, it may change the direction of their life forever. They saw you keep your heart open after disappointment. They noticed the quiet strength with which you carried burdens that most people never even knew existed. That left a deeper impression than any words ever could. At a deeper level, people are moved more by emotional authenticity than by perfection. Perfection often feels distant. It can feel impossible to relate to. But someone who has been hurt and still chooses compassion possesses something much more powerful. They carry a credibility that comes from experience, a truth that cannot be faked. Your struggles communicated a message they desperately needed to see. Not through speeches, not through advice, but through your actions. You showed them that pain does not have to destroy kindness. You showed them that suffering does not have to erase the ability to love. You showed them that a person can go through hardship without becoming cold, bitter, or emotionally closed off. That realization changed something inside them. For perhaps the first time in a very long time, they felt emotionally safe around another person. And emotional safety is one of the rarest gifts anyone can experience. People spend endless amounts of time talking about attraction, desire, and chemistry, yet far fewer the relief that comes from feeling accepted exactly as you are. The comfort of not having to perform. The freedom of not having to prove your worth. The peace that comes from knowing you can simply exist. Around you, they felt that freedom. They did not feel pressured to become someone different. They did not feel forced to hide their flaws. They felt seen in their imperfections and accepted despite them. Psychologically, this creates a bond that runs incredibly deep. Every human being longs to be understood without judgment. Behind every confident exterior, there are fears. There are insecurities. There are doubts that few people ever see. Most relationships never move beyond the surface because people spend so much energy protecting themselves. They hide behind carefully maintained identities. They create versions of themselves that feel safer to show the world. They hope no one notices what lies underneath. But with you, those barriers slowly began to weaken. At first that frightened them, yet at the same time, it began healing them. This is why the truth they are preparing to share carries so much emotional weight. What they need to express goes far beyond simple affection. It is not merely about attraction. It is not only admiration. It is about significance. They are preparing to admit that your presence became important to their emotional world,